and welcome to Chicago Reacts. My name is Lauren, and today I'm doing a follow-up on a video I did recently that was about the Titan Submersible. So now I'm watching, this is a different creator. This is Scott Manley has this video. It's about the wreckage of the Titan Submersible reveals how it was imploded. So we're going to learn some new stuff about this Titan Submersible. I have kind of been following this. I've seen a few of the clips from the hearings, but and mostly what I know is that once again people were telling him, like Mr. Stockton Rush. You know, whatever. People have been, people told Frappaway McGee over and over and over again that he was being unsafe and he fired them. So that's really the information I have. So I'm curious to see a little bit more about it. I hope y'all are interested in this. I've been finding it fascinating, and, you know, I may be a little less empathetic towards, it all than I should be, but I feel like I'm also not I am in the same boat as a lot of other people on that one, and our boat doesn't have leaks, so let's go.
Hello, it's Scott Manley here. It's been over a year since OceanGate's Titan Submersible was crushed while visiting the wreck of the Titanic. And now we are finally getting a look at the investigation that has been going on into what happened. For the last couple of days, I've been watching and listening to witnesses who have been testifying before US Coast Guard inquiry. I think we've got like another 9 days worth of testimony.
Oh, wow.
A lot of witnesses, but the ones we've seen so far are, well, they've told me a lot, and I'm fascinated by the way things fail. But we have the lead engineer who was fired after questioning some of the design decisions. His background, by the way, includes work on the Space Shuttle solid rocket boosters. And then yesterday we had David Lockridge, who's a Scottish submersible expert who ran their operations right up until the point he got fired for, you know, embarrassing the CEO a little too many times. He went into detail on how the CEO, Stockton Rush, crashed a submarine into the wreck of the Andrea Doria. And then there's Tim Catterson, who he put the sub in the water, he watched it go down, had breakfast, came back and found out they'd lost communications. He ended up sticking around throughout the search and rescue and recovery. And I'm sure you know that I am fascinated by engineering disasters, and, you know, understanding why things failed is a lot to do with how I learn how things work.
It started out, it seems like a lot of the times why things fail are ego of the person in charge, like needing to, I don't know, it feels like, especially in this case, but I feel like in a lot of these things, it's so ego driven. These people have to be the very best, and they have to be right all the time because they're so freaking spoiled their whole lives. No one's ever told them no. So, like, as soon as, and then, like, things end up going really terribly and people die. And it's like, this is why you need to be told no as a kid, honestly. This is why you need people who will tell it to you like it is.
And so, yes, I have a certain, let's say, morbid fascination about how exactly this failed. Obviously, very early on, I was sure this was going to be a failure and it was going to be recovering not bodies but remains.
Oh.
With water pressures of 400 atmospheres or thereabouts, the failure of the submarine would have been mercifully instantaneous. At the time, I believe the phrase that I used was that humans in this situation stopped being biology and started being physics. And honestly, that was paraphrasing XKCD. But even with this knowledge that the implosion of the submersible would have been violent and instantaneous, that still left a lot of questions about exactly how this would happen. Was the implosion a failure in the carbon fiber around the middle, at the ends? Was it the window, which of course was not rated to those depths? What exactly happened? And we didn't have any clues. We had some pictures of wreckage. Well, now we actually have footage from an ROV, from Pelagic Research. This was actually, I believe, the second ROV. The first one was from a different ship, and it was not able to handle the depths and got
wow.
crushed. But this shows us the footage, which was the moment where they were absolutely sure there was no recovery possible, showing the tail cone from the OceanGate submersible damaged, but actually largely intact. And
This is a really good video, too. Oh my god. I mean, just it kind of feels like flexing on them, honestly.
many people have been pointing out the ratchet strap, which is wrapped around it, and it seems to have worked just fine. So this was a non-pressurized section of the hull.
Oh my god, they even have the
That contained support equipment, it contained like batteries, it contained communications, it powered the thrusters. And in front of that was actually the pressurized section. This section didn't fail, this was just separated from the rest when the pressure vessel in front of it had a catastrophic failure. The basic design had a cylindrical carbon fiber pressure section with titanium hemispheres on each end.
And from what I remember about the last video, the carbon fiber was like was not rated for this. People were really worried about the carbon fiber, people who knew what they were talking about, because again, it's not what they use for subs and such, because it's not, they can't guarantee that it's going to be consistent. Like they can't guarantee that it's not going to wear down. Like they use other material because it's factually better long term.
Service module on the back, and then around this there were the thrusters, the landing gear, and various other pieces of hardware. And the general assumption was that the carbon fiber had failed. Why? Because everybody thought that carbon fiber being used in a submersible was a bad idea, albeit despite the fact that the US Navy had in fact successfully built a carbon fiber submersible that went to deeper depths for many more voyages.
Okay. Yeah, because like what I remember the question being wasn't that is it going to be, can you do it? Because you could, but will it hold up to multiple dives over time, or will it wear away? And there wasn't enough research on that. He might be about to completely just blow that one out of the water, no pun intended, but that's what I remember hearing.
Advanced underwater search system was basically a one-off carbon fiber pressure hull vehicle. And they had been testing it because they wanted to consider moving larger submersibles to, a carbon fiber-based system, because it would be easier to build that kind of stuff. I believe this also used titanium hemispheres at each end. So there was a lot of detail out there on how this thing gets built. As part of the hearing, they've also posted a number of other documents online giving us new details into, the work that was done, including a bunch of engineering studies, finite element analysis looking at the structure, and specifically saying, well, the failure mode, the logical failure mode would be a collapse, a buckle in the middle of the vessel.
Okay.
And sure, while this shows that it could work on paper, translating the paper into a working product sometimes leads to imperfections.
That's so true with like a lot of science, and like, because destroying things in a lab or making things in a lab work doesn't necessarily mean it will work IRL. Like that happens with a lot of like medical research, where it's like they can get something to be effective in laboratory conditions, but like when you try to translate that into animal or humans, it does not work. Which is, that's them's the breaks. That's how it goes sometimes. But like that's why we do like a lot of testing. That's why you're supposed to do a lot of testing for things, because just because it works on paper doesn't mean there's no guarantee.
Anyway, one of the important things they also published was the transcript, and they did it in the form of an animation showing basically the final, descent. And what is important to take away from this is that this wasn't something where they thought there was something going wrong. If there was, that wasn't evidence in any of the communications. What we do see is the communications were really unreliable. This is via an acoustic modem. Basically, it's making click sounds that are traveling through the water to the ship up top. And the messages are piggybacked on top of this. There's also some telemetry being sent up, and that's how they know the depth that it's at. Now, the last message that was sent says dropped 2 weights, and then a few seconds later, contact is lost. This was at a depth of 3,346 meters. They still had a few hundred meters to go towards the bottom. This wasn't an emergency situation. If they were wanting to come back up, they would have dropped more weights. No, this was just to slow their descent so that they wouldn't come to the bottom, and potentially bang into things. I mean, to be clear, we can't know for sure. Maybe the hull was making weird noises and people were asking to go back up and he just said, oh, we'll drop a couple of weights. We don't honestly know.
Approximately 10:47 at 32 a.m. On June 18, 2023, communications and tracking from the submersible Titan to the Polar Prince was lost. The location and depth of the Titan at the time was a mishap of 41.73 degrees, blah, blah, blah.
But now, as of a few hours ago, we have the first footage from the ROV showing the failed pressure hull, and this does show probably where the failure began to happen. So what we're seeing here, that is the nose cone. That is the front hemisphere there.
Oh, geez.
We saw that come up to the surface without the window in it. It doesn't look like the window's there. But there is the main pressure hull. And around it, you can see shattered pieces of carbon fiber composite. You can also see the rear hemisphere. We can tell it's the rear hemisphere because it has the anchor points for the tail cone there. So if we pause it, first of all, you can see that a lot of the carbon fiber composite has essentially been pushed back inside that tail cone. And that is where the occupants would be. And, and you can imagine with that pressure pushing that material in very quickly, it would just be a mess. Like the human brain works on orders of a fraction of a second. This would take milliseconds. The brain simply wouldn't perceive this happening before it stopped functioning. So now in front of the rear dome, you can also see the titanium ring, which was interfaced to the barrel section, to the carbon fiber section. Wow. Now, if you compare this to the nose, it's just sitting there on its own. There's very little debris around it. So this is telling me that the failure that happened was at the front of the pressure module. So the water is all flowing in from one end, carrying the debris down, and the other end is more or less just kicked off by the rebound. That's why it's kind of clean. Also, we know that it wasn't the window that failed, because if the window had failed, you would have water flowing in, and then you would basically have the hull getting blasted outwards. Instead, we see carbon fiber being pushed into the rear of that hemisphere. That means it was an implosion of the carbon fiber vessel starting at the forward dome. And the difference is so stark. This leads me to believe that this is actually a failure at the interface between the carbon fiber barrel and the titanium rings which are used to mount on the end plates. Now, notably, nowhere in this footage do I see any sign of that forward ring. It was clearly kicked away from this and moved sufficiently fast that it's fallen out of sight. And to be fair, it is probably more, aerodynamic, hydrodynamic, I guess, than those big spherical end caps. So it's likely that it moved a bit further after the initial event. And given that the event probably began around that ring, I could see it getting pushed a bit faster. I suspect we're going to get more details on this in coming days.
Yeah, especially because he said there's 9 more days. When did this come out? When did he post this video? He posted this video on September 19th, so just a couple days ago. So Monday, I guess. It maybe starts again on Monday. I highly doubt that they're doing... Today's Sunday. I was like, what day is today? Yeah. So tomorrow they'll probably start doing more stuff. Oof.
I'm pretty sure there will be some evidence on the forward ring, which was absolutely brought to shore. Okay, so just to explain what I just said.
Yes, thanks.
This is what I think actually happened. I think the failure begins somewhere along this front bulkhead, right? Somewhere between these two things. Now, you got to imagine, yes, that there is a bulkhead here. Sorry, that you have a sphere right here, right?
Okay.
And you've got the window on the front. And somewhere around this circumference, water basically starts pushing in, or it breaks, or there's a crack. And the cracks, once a crack starts, it propagates backwards, right? You get water will start pushing its way in, and you got to imagine that this stuff starts getting pushed in all the way around, right? Okay. So the water is pushing this in, and as it runs down, you're going to have these cracks, and more stuff is going to get pushed backwards like this as the sides get squished inwards, right? So this is what's happening. Now, equally, you got the water is kind of rushing into this gap here, and it fills this gap and will pop this window out. That's why it's not in there. And the pressure will also just knock this entire section off on its own, right?
All right, and all of this happens within milliseconds. That's crazy. It's crazy how fast it would have happened.
The water's like flying backwards. It smashes into this bulkhead. Obviously, everything in here gets smashed up against this, bumps into this, and the tail will get detached off on its own as it recoils. So what you're left with is the hemisphere, the ring, and a whole bunch of carbon fiber debris and whatever is left inside this, all shattered. That's what I think this is showing. This is why I think we have a failure here. If we had a failure in the middle, then this sort of failure process would propagate in both directions, and you would have carbon fiber debris in here
that makes
and
sense.
in here, right?
That does make sense, because it would be from the center and an equal explosion, but it had to have been here because there was almost nothing over here. Everything this got slingshotted all the way. Okay, that tracks. That makes sense.
I should also point out that this is radically different from all the other OceanGate Titan failure simulations, and there's been a lot of these on YouTube using very sophisticated techniques, I will say. Great work, but they all show a failure in the middle of the vessel because that's where the peak stress is. So now I'm sure we'll see some of these people redo their work with the new knowledge that we have gained in the last couple of days. And so we do actually have footage of the installation of these titanium end rings, the end rings that act as the interface to the hemispheres. And the way this works, it is literally like an epoxy glue that gets laid on along the end of this. You don't want it to be too thick. It has to be a nice, thin, even layer, and then you have to do the same to your titanium rings, and you see that they have a groove which more or less matches to the dimensions of the carbon fiber pressure hull. Oof. And then, of course, you gotta line this up.
It's so interesting, though, to see like this footage, and then like look at what the footage from the of the wreckage, because it's like it looks so much smaller there, like on the ocean floor. So it's like, as opposed to here, where it's clearly huge. Like it's clearly a lot bigger than it looks like in the wreckage footage. And it's just like a little bit of cognitive dissonance there.
Drop it in there and it will stick in place, and that's your interface. And if you're sitting there looking at this and saying, well, that's obviously a newbie mistake, they shouldn't have done that. This is pretty much what the US Navy did on their design. So it's not necessarily bad, but I think the problem is a little more subtle than this being a dumb idea. So there's like a 300-page paper on that US...
I just wouldn't trust it. I'm like, I don't want to go into like a giant ship like, but it's held together by glue. I'm like, I don't love that. And again, maybe that's just, me being a layperson and I don't actually know anything about it, but I'm just like, it would unnerve me. There's reasons that I don't necessarily want to know how certain things work. It's like, I don't want to know how it's made. I don't know what goes into it. Like, I don't want to know how the sausage gets made. That'll make me even less likely to want to eat the sausage. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, but not if you are the one building the thing. If you're the one doing it, no, then in that case, ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance gets people killed.
Navy submarine design, and they actually test models to destruction, but they point out that when they did the test to destruction, they did it using steel end plates. And if I remember correctly, they go into some detail pointing out that you have to match basically the compressive moduli. So in engineering, you have like the modulus of compression and tension. Basically, how much force you put on it, it changes the length of something. So modulus of compression is just like how much it changes when you apply a certain pressure. And you need to have the titanium section and the carbon fiber section both agree roughly on how much they flex.
See, like, okay, this is like some of the footage I was talking about, because it's like, it's clearly was a lot bigger, like, but it looks so small. It looks like this big.
When pressure is applied. Otherwise, what will happen is you will get a transfer, you will get extra stress at the joins. Like, over the last year, we've heard a lot of stories about how the carbon fiber composite used in this may have been, you know, a little cut price, that they might have bought some pre-preg cheap from Boeing that was past its sell-by date, that they might not have, you know, controlled the environment during the layup as well as they could have.
And, you know, if they're buying it from Boeing, just saying, Boeing's had it hardier themselves when it comes to building stuff.
The excess humidity, that there might have been no like testing that was performed, and so if this was even, you know, off by a few percent, then that could well add up to extra stress at these interfaces that might accidentally or might ultimately explain why we got this failure here. Of course, it could just be that the glue was crap and that fell apart, but, you know, I'm trying to find interesting answers, let's say. And yeah, interesting is one way of describing some of the photos that we saw of the construction, like this dubious O-ring design. These were brought out by David. This is a piece of carbon fiber composite which was cut off the end. On the right there, that is showing light from a flashlight shining through this.
Yeah, I was like, that looks like there's so many cracks in this already. Like, why would you want to... That feels bad.
Now, to be fair, this is from the end piece of the very first one that they did. When you are like laying up a cylinder, right? You're basically running this stuff in a spiral pattern. It's like a ribbon you're laying as a spiral pattern. And as you get to the end, you have to change direction. And when you change direction, then the layup doesn't quite lay flat. So you get a little excess at the end where things aren't quite as good as they should be. And of course, you then fix this by just cutting off those end pieces. And they gave out those end pieces to like friends, people that were involved, and of course it doesn't look great, but that was an end piece, so hey, you know, maybe it's okay.
Maybe.
How about this was Stockton's idea for how they would do atmosphere scrubbing. As I'm sure you know, the human body, it metabolizes its food, and you're exhaling excess carbon dioxide and water, and if you're not dumping the atmosphere overboard, you need to scrub that out. So you have things like lithium hydroxide, and you will blow air over it and it will absorb it. Well, his homemade oxygen scrubber design was a plastic container with a base that was instead a grill of metal. You would put your absorbent in that, and then there was like a little PC, computer fan at the top that would blow air through it. I'm not sure how well this would work, but frankly, I'm just terrified that was what their prototype was.
Oh my, that's, again, his whole thing about wanting this to be like very quick or like very, like anyone can do it. Like this is super easy. It's super simple. If like that feels so dangerous. You're going into an incredibly dangerous environment. I would not want someone who has like barely ever done it before. I don't want this like homemade thing. I don't want something that has so little testing. I would not ever be comfortable with that. And like the idea of it being just a Xbox controller or whatever is like, no. I get wanting to do something different and to like make things accessible, but it's all out there that it wasn't about making things accessible. It was about making money. So, it was always going to be a really, really inaccessible trip, only for rich people. So you're not even letting like marine biologists or people who could use this information that you could get. It was always about just getting rich. And he's cutting so many corners trying to be like hip about it all. And he got a bunch of people killed because of it.
I mean, people are making jokes about the video game controller, but actually, I don't have a problem with that at all. It was the multitude of other corners which were cut in the name of cutting costs. compounded by his continual efforts to sidestep regulations and fire anybody who thought they knew better and disagreed with the designs. So look,
everyone who was like, oh, you're not putting emergency rations and stuff in your sub because you think it's a waste of money? You're not putting any of these like extra emergency materials in here to be able to fix things on the fly? No, I'm not getting in that with you. Like, all of the corners, he got so many corners. He got so many corners. And then, like, for me, the video game controller is just the icing on top of a very, tenuous cake. You know that scene from, like, Sleeping Beauty or whatever, where she's making the cake and it's really, like, tiered, but she's never made a cake before, and then she's, like, trying to prop it up with a broom, and it's, like, falling down. That is what the vibe I get.
I'm sure we're going to find out a whole lot more in coming days. I know I'm going to be listening. I'm sure some of you might start, but I'm sure some of the people will tell me all sorts of fascinating and new interesting things, but I wish I didn't have to learn things this way. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.
Thanks, Scott. So yeah, like I said, I've been following some of this myself because it's interesting, and the fact that things are coming out now. I really appreciate though his take on it, and like watching a slightly like a video not about necessarily what like Lockett would say, like Lockett, whatever, the guy, one of the guys who was fired, because I've been following some of that about the hearings themselves and some of the things that have been coming to light because of that. So I'm really interested in this. This was a really cool and different take on it, talking about the sub itself and how it exploded. I appreciated that. I thought that was interesting. I will be continuing to follow this story on my own. If y'all want me to do some more videos about it as it goes on, I will do that as well. Because again, I'm interested. And I hope you are too. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.